just it seems like well, as the live stream begins here, it seems like oftentimes the prompt for the beginning of our show is like the technical issues that we've just had.
Can you hear
like,
me?
Leading up to the show. Yeah. So for me today, once again, it's camera issues, and I don't know why it's not appearing in Chrome. But my continuity camera is working. It's just not appearing in Chrome. And so we're sitting here talking about continuity camera. And it reminded me that you just wrote an article about this, Adam, which I thought was really interesting, about how you just explained to us offline that Apple will never say, you know, it's not going to work this way, but they'll just like, you have to infer, you know, from what they leave out, that you know, like what the truth is of it. So what was your conclusion there? And by the way, welcome Adam Engst of the Content Network. Thanks for joining us live here on Command Control Power.
Glad to be here, guys. It's always fun to talk about stuff. But yeah, so I did this big article how I went all in MagSafe. I'd never used MagSafe before the iPhone 15 Pro, and I'm like, okay, I should finally like learn this stuff and, you know, buy the little devices and everything. And I'm pretty happy with how I've got it working. I mean, MagSafe still has its issues in terms of power efficiency and whatnot, blah, 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 blah. But one of the things I bought was on Etsy, was a little continuity camera mount for my 2020 iMac that would have could take a MagSafe charger, because what I was noticing is my phone would get really drained by the end of a long call. And so I was like, well, if it charges during the long call, then it won't be drained. I'll be good. Yeah. And so I get this thing, I write the article, and you know, the way the timing had worked out, I hadn't had a long call using the new thing. So I have a long call. It clearly didn't charge. Right. And so I do this research, and Apple, indeed, they have, and they talk about it. They say, you know, something to the effect of like, you know, if you want to charge your phone during continuity camera streaming, you know, plug it into USB.
I think it's like for best results, right? And it's actually
yes, that's it. That's exactly
the only results. It's the only way you'll get results.
It's the only results, and I'm now, you know, I've got proof that it will not work via MagSafe, but they will not say that.
They will not admit it. I mean, something as simple as that. You know, it's very clear to me, from this kind of thing, what Apple's marketing kind of like you know, edicts are, and it's sort of like never admit anything related to heat or slow performance, or just don't mention those things. Like if we don't mention them, then there's no story here. You know,
yeah. Nothing. No, it's really
to a fault. It's really to a fault. Like I understand where they're coming from. Like, you know, you don't want to make a big deal of like this fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and like give people, because people will latch on to anything. We all have these calls from clients where they're like, I read on the internet that like there's this big problem. You know,
reboot your iPhone every week.
Right. Yeah. Oh, why? Like one quick tip, you know, from the FBI or whatever. Yeah. All
one quick tip from the NSA in 2016.
Yeah, exactly. Still not a bad idea. I mean, I probably should reboot my phone more. And it's not, you know, and the phone I had trouble with is not my everyday phone. It's my podcasting camera phone. It's like, it's dedicated to that purpose. I reboot it for this purpose, and it just still, anyway. So sometimes it doesn't help.
There's always something.
Yeah, I look great, really, by the way. I just wanted to mention that.
You look great.
Yeah. So I'm doing something new this week, Joe. Do you notice any difference in the camera?
I'm not sure. So are you using that pan and zoom effect? What do we call it? Center stage?
No, but Adam,
I'm using center stage.
I see Adam. Yeah, it's moving nicely. No, Jerry, what are you using? The one of the better cameras on your phone?
I got a free NFR license to Camo Pro. So whatever that enhancement for the video that it adds. So it's one of the options you can do. You first have to turn on Camo Pro, but then you can adjust hue and luminosity and frames per second. And
you're very luminous.
I'm coming to you in HD at 30 frames per second, and I look beautiful, guys.
Very nice. Very nice. Yes, this is true for the live audio listeners. Check out our podcast link in the show notes for the YouTube live stream. You can see Jerry in all his glory there, and Adam as well.
All my stretch marks.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Where's the soft focus when you need it? I guess you can enhance the video just to a certain point and then dial it back with soft focus. Then you've got the perfect.
It's only a matter of time before they just like fix you completely.
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah,
want to look
exactly.
like?
Do you want to look like yourself when you were, 20? Like, we can do that now. It's just it's a checkbox.
Probably a matter of months,
Yeah.
like
Well, I mean,
years
this
at
is probably
most.
a really a good segue into AI. I mean,
Oh
it's
yeah.
so, this is the spider web of this current modern technology. AI is a buzzword. I mean, it's like, very it's a very great marketing term. Apple, of course, took that very great marketing term and leveraged it for their Apple Intelligence. Like, what a great kind of rebranding. It's the perfect Apple ninja move.
Totally clever. I mean, it's at the same time, and I'm actually writing about this right now. I know Apple years ago when remember we had eWorld. My friend Carrie Liu was writing a book about eWorld, and it was sort of an official book, so he was talking about Apple marketing and everything like that. And they, with straight faces, said they were wanted to take over email because eWorld was small e capital W, and the email was small e capital M.
Right.
And they're like, we're going to take this over, and everyone's when they see the word email, they're going to think of eWorld. And Carrie's like, you're all smoking crack.
Yeah. Speaking of smoking things, I love this trend in the keynote now. Every year, it's Air Force One, right? Federighi.
Yeah, Craig Federighi.
He loves to introduce the marketing team and say, that it's a crack team, and he makes lots of little underhanded references about getting high and like
there's something so high as the trees,
Yes, exactly, right. Something about the trees and like high, right? And it's like, okay, we get it, Craig. We get it. Like it's very funny when people like to smoke weed, and we know marketing people sometimes do that. That's very funny,
But did you see the helmet at the beginning in the skydiving gag? He puts on a helmet that mimics his hair.
Yes,
I mean,
that's really good.
I mean, I give them credit for that because they're going with it. They're running with the joke. Like,
the self-deprecation is good. And he had the hair tracker app also, right?
Yes.
As like an example of the hidden apps. It's like if you want to track your hair on a daily basis, like it's the self-deprecation is great. And the and Sequoia, it's a great name, great great place, I guess, great type
all
of
the
tree.
Vowels.
Right.
Every vowel.
And another name that no one can possibly spell or pronounce. I mean, I get clients who are like, what's the thing, Sonoma? I'm like, you've never heard of Sonoma? It's like really pretty common thing. But yeah, so it's a great new time. I mean, there's so much packed into the keynote in the first half, let alone when they finally got to Apple Intelligence, which itself is like again, a spider web of like interrelated technologies, machine learning / AI that just goes in all directions. So yeah, I mean, going back to it, like it will be a check mark if you want to be 20, or a pop up, like, do you want to be 30? Do you want to be 20, 25? And AI will just figure that out from your photos that are already in your photo library and just live animate you with your current facial expressions.
Yep. As I said, it's just a matter of time. I mean, with what we're seeing is so obvious that this kind of thing is going to be happening. No, the keynote was tough, honestly, because I mean, what I'm doing, I need to take notes, right? Because I need to write about it right away. Although what I did this year is I spun up Audio Hijack and used its transcribe function. So I have an 88K transcription of the entire keynote, which I did a very good job on. I then tried to use the various chatbots to summarize that, and they all failed miserably. And the reason was it's like a compression problem, right? It was already so compressed, like with one sentence for a feature, that summarization just failed.
Right.
So then I told Claude was the only one that succeeded at this. I told it to list all the features that Apple announced, and did a much better job when you did that. So, but again, just a really interesting, kind of way Apple does things now is this is so tightly scripted, and no one's even stumbling. So this must be multiple takes, people memorizing lines, the works. But very impressive and very hard to follow, almost too fast.
Yeah, totally.
You just
I mean,
couldn't do it.
Including like some very major features. I mean, they kind of just whiz through like, oh, and if you want to use iPhone mirroring on your Mac, that's really cool. And we're like, oh yeah, that's great from a support standpoint. And then they're like, oh, and you can also like remote control a family's, friend's iPhone. And I'm like, well, that's huge,
like, there's like they built something into SharePlay, but it got like 4 seconds of coverage. I'm like,
yeah,
okay,
right. There's so much to unpack. It's really a big year for, it seems like, especially, Mac OS and iOS. iPad OS gets everything iOS gets in like a couple new things, I guess, but it seems like it keeps being like, well, maybe next year it'll be the big, huge upgrade.
And that was disappointing after they go and release the latest sets of iPad hardware, where you're just, it's stunning what they've done with the iPad Pros in particular. You've got to be kidding. I mean, this technology is, from the future.
Right.
And then you're fitting it with iPad OS?
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, it's a tough problem. Yeah, Gruber had a take on this about how, well, maybe like we're looking at it wrong. Like maybe, we're looking at hardware specs and thinking, well, it's so powerful, we need better software to take advantage of that. But maybe the fact that it's so powerful and there's basically no delay, with anything you do, it's just so responsive.
I don't buy it. We didn't have delay before.
That's true.
We didn't have delay before. I mean, it's not like this sucked before. So no, I mean, it is a real problem. And I remember talking to someone years and years and years ago about this, was, kind of high up in the industry at the time. And he was saying like, we're even then, this was probably 20 years ago, we have more processing power than we know what to do with. And so software is always looking for what to do, something to do with that processing power. And in some sense, we found it, right? The AI features need the processing power and the RAM. Those are the two things.
Totally. That's what I was wondering. Like, so what is Apple doing? They're creating, like, the hardware team seems to be ahead of the software team. I mean, for years now, and for quite a long time. I've been hearing for years from inside the company that like we really need like OS engineers, like we're really like, please help us. Like, it's like, I don't think that's like they don't want that to be like known in the industry, but certainly they would love. And I think that's actually like kind of an industry wide problem, is there just aren't a lot of like OS engineers. And like, I mean, there's a lot of developers out there making third-party apps, but I don't think a lot of people are focused on like working for Apple on first party features at the OS level.
My understanding is that Apple, you work very hard. You're paid pretty well, but you don't get the same kind of freedom and credit you do as an independent developer. So if you have the idea for your app, it's easy to jump ship.
And you may hit it big. You may get a windfall if you're really successful with your app. So yeah, it's hard. I don't know how you like realign those incentives. We should be paying more, for OS developers, and maybe Apple can let them take some glory, because that's the other thing, is like you can't really talk about the thing you been working on for a year until like it ships and you're like, oh, I did this, like I made this pixel on that one screen, So yeah, it's tricky, but I definitely want to see them getting more software support. But so is Apple doing this like deliberately? Are they planting seeds for future improvements in software by releasing really good M1, 2, 3, and 4 chips, like now even in the iPad, getting ahead of things? Or is it all about AI?
It's an interesting question, and I don't believe they had this in mind. I mean, keep in mind, ChatGPT only launched in October 2022, I think.
Yeah, or like November, I think, even
November. Yeah. So I mean, it was late 2022.
Yeah.
And so and before that, it's not like no one knew about GPTs and transformers and whatnot, but there was no sense that part of the AI space was interesting.
It's also just pause on that, Adam. Sorry to interrupt, but I found I have a friend who had access. I mean, you probably do too, like to OpenAI's models before ChatGPT came out, and was describing the interface to me like before. So one of the major innovations with ChatGPT was the natural language interface, being able to sit and just talk to it through a keyboard. Now you can talk to it with your voice, which is even cooler with 4.0. But so being able to use natural language to make and receive responses was the huge innovation. I mean, that was like an accessibility, rocket ship essentially. Before that, it was like a series of like fields and toggles and things like that a programmer would use. It's like, how much weight do you want to put on this keyword, and how much, and like, do you want to, and so like real normal people couldn't use it. Maybe they could get an account, but they didn't really know what to do with it. It's interesting to me that, like, to your point, these things existed, but no one really knew the power. But even people like in that field of machine learning barely knew the power until ChatGPT actually came out with that interface.
Well, my son's a PhD in machine learning, and I remember his junior year internship. There's a company in New Jersey, and I can't remember the super details of it. But basically what they were doing is that companies would have this kind of data store of documents, and the idea was to create a system that could query those documents in useful ways, which is very easy to understand now.
Yeah.
Right. But he graduated in 21. So this is in 2020, 2019, something like that. That back then was, they were kind of a hot startup, and, oh my gosh, this, businesses are going to love this because they have these archives of data that they can't really access in a useful way.
Right.
And so it was happening, but you're right that it was not in any way at the consumer level or really quite understandable as to what you would do with it.
Right.
Beyond these very specific and to be clear, I think generative AI is most interesting in these targeted uses. In some ways, talking to ChatGPT, it's great fun. It can be useful in a few inches, but man, you want to change the world. That's when you apply it to, okay, we're gonna look at the entire works of Shakespeare, and now we can learn things that could not have been learned before because we have the ability to model this in a different way, or all Greek text. Literally ancient Greek text. We have all of it. Like if there's something called Perseus Project, and suddenly being able to throw that into a large language model that's been tweaked for ancient Greek, suddenly gets you capabilities that are previously unheard of in those fields. So if you're not a classicist, you don't care. The same thing like medical imaging, the stuff we've been able to do with image stuff. Great, fine. You can, make pretty pictures, but if you can actually interpret radiology images vastly more effectively than human experts, that changes the world. So those are the things that really matter. But what we hear about is ChatGPT in some ways because it's so easy and cool to use.
Yeah, I look at ChatGPT as sort of like a thesaurus on steroids. It's like, it's sort of just like
the best thesaurus ever.
Yeah,
I just used it today to find a word. Commiserate. I was like, it was on the tip of my tongue. Like, I want to commiserate. That's it.
Exactly. And it's sort of like it's like a thesaurus for entire like concepts, or a thesaurus for like a sentence or a paragraph or whatever. And it goes way beyond that. And then I look at like some of the, just like machine learning in general as sort of like an intuition on steroids. You're describing like if you work in the medical field and your job is to review, a radiology scan or whatever, and determine like what the issue is, or if there's an issue or not, or whatever. And you're looking at it. You're not running a search query like with your brain. You're not saying like, show me if there's a shape that looks like this. You're kind of just like looking for something you may not even know how to describe, but your intuition has been trained over like many, many examples and many years of practice and whatever, being right, being wrong. There's feedback involved, like, oh, you were really off on that one. Whoops, I'll never make that mistake again. Rewrite that intuition, and so then these models get trained in that way, but they're not even programmed necessarily to like know what to look for. It's like they tell us what they notice, which is like such a weird concept that's way different from search.
One of the big things I'm talking and writing about this recently, that's kind of important to think about, is that generative AI gives you the statistically probable answer. Mm-hmm. So in essence, it's great when, like if you need the flash of genius. No, it's never going to do that. But like what the crowd knows, what everyone knows. So I mean, in some ways, it's like Dear Abby on steroids, right? You know, like because Dear Abby never said anything that everyone. It was interesting because we all agree, right? You know, Dear Abby says, "Oh, you should do this." Well, of course you should do this. What are you, moron? You know, like we all know that you should. You know, you should not be cheating on your girlfriend and lying about it. Blah, blah, you know.
Right.
So, but that's the kind of thing where generative AI, because it's this general consensus, this real base level, it's never going to be great, and it's never going to be terrible. It's going to be right in the middle there, because that's what you're doing. You're doing the statistically probable answer. And
yeah, I feel like it goes beyond that a little bit. I mean, I definitely, like, you know, when ChatGPT came out, the criticism was, it's just a sentence completion algorithm. It just predicts the next word. You know, it's just statistically like which word should come next, or really which letter should come next, and then some other magic that's happening to kind of refine that. And it's like, well, isn't that what we're doing? Kind of like now this gets into questions about like free will versus determinism. Like, of course, I'm saying
don't want to go there. Don't want to go there.
Yeah, like, of course, you know, I was predestined to say this sentence that I'm in the middle of saying, and I don't know where it's going to end. You know, and like the chat models are doing the same. But there's also something else magical, because it's like it's not just statistics. It's sort of like finding connections that aren't like necessarily programmed in statistically, or I mean, maybe it is still just weights and measures. I don't know.
No, that's just it. They're not programmed in, but they are statistical.
Yeah,
and
good point.
The reason why it can seem magical, and this is another kind of the major points that I've been trying to make and this is why people criticize it like crazy, is that ChatGPT is like a C+ student. Like, you're not going to get A+ or even B work out of ChatGPT. And that's totally fine, because you don't, I mean, this is why people criticize it. The people who like say, oh, it does a horrible job at writing. Believe me, I've done this myself. I'm a professional writer. I don't publish something which I believe is less than A work. You know, I just don't do it. That's what my job is. And so yeah, if I get something back that's C+ work, I'm like, oh, it's kind of lame.
You're going to criticize it.
But there's lots of places where we are not better than C+ students.
Right.
And so, like, if you ask it to write you a poem, I am not a C+ poet. I'm just not. And so it spits out a poem for me. I'm like, hey, pretty good.
Well, I mean, also that being said, there's a lot of bad writers out there that have to somehow get by with email and all the other things. And, you know, maybe the C+, maybe the average, I mean, I don't want to be too cynical, but maybe the average is D+ or something. And maybe like if everybody, you know, it's sort of like autonomous driving. There, you know, every accident you see, it's like, look at this, it's terrible. It, you know, the car crashed, and it's, you know, it's supposed to be a computer and never make mistakes or whatever. You know, autonomous driving is terrible. But in fact, if you look statistically, like those things happen much less to autonomous vehicles than they do to human
People suck at drivers.
Actually. Yeah. So, I mean, actually, like maybe that still brings up the average, and you know, there's still a lot of problems with that. But with the, you know, with like writing, I mean, obviously for some people it would just be like, use the output. It's better than what you would have come up with. You know, for someone who's looking for higher quality, refine it, you know, take it and use it as a draft.
So you know, like, again, like this write me an email kind of thing is a real common one. And again, for people like me who I literally have, you know, like 80,000 emails or something like that I have written, those just crazy amounts. No, it's never ever going to help me. But imagine that English is not your first language.
Yeah.
Boom. Huge win. You know, right there. Or something that I have been told, again, a little hard for me to quite understand at a gut level. A lot of people have email anxiety. You know, that if you're younger and you've only, you know, you mostly communicate via text message level things, where it's not important that it be spelled right, or, you know, all that. And suddenly you have to write an email message to your supervisor about something important.
Right.
You're freaking out.
Yeah.
And so that's another case where having some help from the chatbot is going to be a big deal. And the better example that I've used, and I really do like, is there's hard emails, right? There's the, you know, this person who you work with, their mother just died. you know, and they've been out of work and they come back and you have to say something, you know, you have to write them an email about this or something like that. Oh man, those are just tough emails. Or you have to fire an employee, or you think, you know, someone's embezzling, like whatever. Like these are really tough things to do. And but at the same time, no one's expecting creativity. Like they don't have to be great. They just have to be the genre, you know, the condolence message, the HR message about, you know, I'm sorry we've had to let you go, blah blah blah, or you know, someone's retiring and you've got the euphemisms about going to spend you know time with their family. We all know what these things sound like, right?
Yeah.
That's all you have to do, and it will write that for you like that.
Yeah. That's a great point. It's like an assistant. I mean, if you're, you know, of certain means, you know, you just have a person who follows you around all day and you say, send flowers to this person, write a condolence to this person. And, you know, it's just in their voice and they just have access to whatever resources they need to like always do it the right way and, you know, use certain protocols and whatever. And so, yeah, we all have that level of, you know, assistance now if we need to.
And that actually brings up the sort of the third big thing that I, you know, talk about, like when you're trying to figure out good uses. One is you can't be too good. If you're too good, you're not going to like the results. The second, you know, sort of have to be willing to, you know, take the C+ work. And then the third is it is an assistant. It is not a search engine. So a search engine, you just type in your words and you get the answer back, or results back anyway. I mean, most of us probably do not refine our search as much because, you know, we've been trained over many years now to you get the keywords in, you're going to get the right stuff back, more or less. But with the chatbots in particular, you need to keep going. It's a conversation with this highly knowledgeable, completely imperturbable idiot. And so you can say things like, you know, you do this for me. What did you miss? You know, like you would never say that to a person, you know, like, oh, you just did all this work for me. What's missing from it? Oh, I don't know. You know, like I thought I did everything. You know, the chatbot, perfectly happy to tell you what's missing. And or you know, and that kind of thing where or you can say, you know, like you didn't do this from, you know, like this isn't what I, you know, from the right perspective, you know, like what if you were this kind of person? How would you change your response? And so the idea that you've got this assistant, you've got to work with the assistant. You got to be ready for that. That's the third thing, because if you're not willing to do that, you're not going to get very good responses out of a chatbot.
Yeah, it's really true.
If I may be so bold as to say that using Gemini specifically, which is the Google product, I have email anxiety. I'm at best a C+ writer communicating with my clients, you know, and it literally has transformed my business and my communication with my clients. Now, you know, everybody who listens to this would say, well, you have to modify it. It's not always right. Well, of course, but I get the core of what I need to tell my client in a much more concise way. I've had most recent issues where we were moving people from an email service provider to Microsoft 365, and we ran into some technical issues, and I needed to explain that in a very cohesive way that the customer would understand. And in very short order, Gemini, and of course it required, in most cases when I use it, it does require massaging, but it lays it out so beautifully. And sometimes, you know, the tone of it may be a little too formal, or sometimes it might be a little too friendly. And I'll just say, you know, please make this a little bit more professional. And I'll get another example of the same but for putting across really difficult concepts to clients in a very simple way. It can just take everything that I know, and I would spend hours, well, not hours, maybe 20 minutes doing an email, and now I could do it in 3 or 4 minutes. So it's been wonderful. I don't pay for any sort of enhanced version 4.0. I've certainly looked at the Microsoft product, which is called, anybody want to help me out here?
Copilot.
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 Yeah. I have less success with that, but if Gemini fails me, I will go to the free version of ChatGPT.
Interesting. I've actually had the least luck with Gemini, but overall, Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT, Meta AI, there's a couple of others. They're certainly comparable. I've not found situations where I'm like, oh wow, this one's just so obviously better, and then the others. But again, yeah, it has to be the right example. It has to be the thing that you're not going to be good at on your own, such that you're like, wow, that's great. You're like, you just kicked this out, and that's better than I would have done. I'm good. Let's move on.
Yeah.
And you can do it in minutes, right? You're not taking hours to do this stuff.
Yeah. It's never copy and paste, but whatever communications I have to relay to a client, it's so my forward-facing communications are so much better now. So much better.
Yeah. And to be, just to emphasize that, you do see occasionally the people who do copy and paste. And oh wow, is that terrible?
And you notice, you can tell. Yeah. It's like, oh, this is not quite in your voice. So I had a client who told me that she's been using this very heavily, and I noticed it in her emails to your point about, like, you can see when it's a copy paste, and it's not just a clear copy paste with sort of like errors, but it's just like tonally it's a little different than what I'm used to from her. And it's fine. It's like people's tone can change over time too. I've become less, flowery in some of my emails to clients and stuff over the years. And so anyway, but so she writes these emails, and then I spoke with her about it at one point, and she was saying how it's learning her tone. She believes it's like learning her writing style and things over time. So I'm wondering, is that because I have a lot less experience with these tools? So is that just what starts to happen over time, or do you have to like really feed it a bunch of things and say, this is an example of my writing, do it like this?
So is she using ChatGPT or?
I think mostly ChatGPT. Yeah.
Okay, so ChatGPT does have forget what they call it right now. It used to be like custom settings or something like that, but it's something else now. Where basically you can just feed it all of these things that you want it to take into account for every chat.
Okay.
Which is actually really useful because you can get it to not sound like the excitable college student with access to a thesaurus.
Right.
I literally got some email from some Cornell students about we are fervently engaged, and I'm like, I do not need to know you are fervently engaged.
That's maybe too many. Like, you went too far with your. That's like maybe go back to draft 3. Like, you're on draft 10. You go back to draft 3. It was better.
So being able to preload ChatGPT with like, these are things that I want to be true of all of the things that you come out. That's where you're going to get that. Okay. My understanding of the technology in ChatGPT, otherwise though, is it will more or less, apart from that, it will start fresh every time. So it will know the context of that entire chat. But I don't believe that it's keeping track of you. And then I could be wrong about that, but I don't believe it's keeping track of everything you've ever told it and taking that into account. So what may be happening, in fact, is that she's adjusting what she thinks is a good style to what it's popping out. So of course it's sounding more like her.
Right. That, and also maybe her prompts are changing, like any
she might
technology.
Be better at prompting.
Exactly. And I think that's also actually good. Yeah, go ahead.
To be fair, ChatGPT is improving, right? I mean, we went from 3 to 3.5 to 4 now, and you know, so it's going to be doing better in that too. But tone is tough. You may have noticed. I mean, that was one of the things when Apple has their in their Apple Intelligence writing tools, they've got the rewrite tool, and it lets you choose friendly, professional, or concise.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of for Jerry's example was, their Apple's example that they spent all of 4 seconds on in the demo was like, the person's writing like, we like must in all caps, like, it's quote, very important in all caps, like all these things. And it's like, rewrite this to be more professional or, and maybe friendly in a different example. But it takes out all the all caps, words, and it like makes it, just as emphatic, but like in a professional way. And it's a very good example of how to do that.
I don't don't know if you guys remember this, long ago, Eudora, rest in peace, we love Eudora, had a flame monitor, chili peppers. So when you were
Oh,
writing, it
interesting.
would
Yeah.
look for keywords in your text. It was not doing any AI or processing. It would just
Yeah.
look for keywords and give you 1, 2, or 3 chili peppers for like, is this a flame bait message? You
Interesting.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we've had this kind of stuff for a long time, but it's useful because people. I mean, there is that. You know, we've all heard the advice, right? When you're angry, you're like, don't send a message
Don't
angry.
send it. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Come back to it the next day and you're like, oh, I don't believe I could send that, you know?
Right.
And so that
Exactly.
really is, you know, this is kind of the automated way of doing that. Don't
Yeah.
let me send an angry message.
Right. So there's a lot of models to choose from. There's a lot of avenues into them. You know, there's ChatGPT, just the free website. There's using an API key to like, you know, use, I mean, they have a native app now, I think. I haven't played with it yet. I was using MindMac for a little bit, which, you know, works with all the different models and you just plug in the API key. There's probably other third-party tools that integrate a little bit more heavily. But of course, what I'm excited about now is the fact that it will be first party. You know, the fact that Apple will allow you to use different models eventually. Will allow you to use your own OpenAI account, you know, or just use the free version. But the main benefit is integrating it, like you said, with the writing tools. So you're in Pages, you're in, you know, your mail app or whatever, and you can just click a button right there. So that's, to me, a very nice improvement, because what stops me is like, I'm already flying through this email. I'm going to get through it in a few minutes. Sure, it might take me 5 minutes, whereas I could have done it in 1 minute with ChatGPT, but I'm not going to like go out to a different tab, you know, find where it is on my screen. It's too much trouble. So is that the workflow up until now that both of you are using? Like, is just copy and paste from your mail app to ChatGPT, get a suitable response, copy and paste back, then massage it. Is that basically what we're all doing?
I am.
So here's what you're doing. So I actually don't generate text in any of these things because I'm a writer. That's not what I use it for. The main tool that I've been using is Grammarly, and I'm still slightly offended that I need Grammarly because like it catches things mistakes I shouldn't make. You know, typos, doubled words, that kind of thing. You know, misplaced commas. You know, whatever. And so that's why I use it, because I don't try to make these mistakes, and I'm not writing worse because of it. I'm simply not taking as much time to catch those mistakes.
I see.
But in the recent last year or so, they've added some AI features, and so they will do a little bit more than just their grammatic rules in terms of being able to say this is wrong. They'll actually sometimes probably like our best version, and sometimes I'll look at their sentence and go, it's better. Okay, you know, as a professional writer, you also have to learn not to love your text too much.
Yeah,
kill your darlings,
right? Is that the
kill your darlings?
Famous phrase? Yeah. It's
Precisely.
tough to do because you're like, I spent all this time crafting this sentence. It's actually not really relevant to the piece anymore, but I still want to use it. You know?
Yeah. So that's thing one. Thing two, which I haven't quite gotten into my workflow. There's actually a word processor called Lex.page. An online word processor, kind of like Google Docs. Works very well, but basically it's built entirely out of on top of AI. So you can talk to your document and talk to its chatbot about your document. Wow. And the part of the reason why I haven't gotten too into it is that I do like so I have a fairly extensive BBEdit text factory that when I paste I copy something out of Google Docs and I paste it into WordPress when I'm publishing a Tidbits article or a TCN article, and then I reveal text and I run the text factory on the raw text that Google, the raw HTML that Google spits out, and it cleans it up hugely. My text factory. But Lex.page does different HTML, and I'd have to rewrite my cleanup macro. And if I move it into Google Docs from Lex.page, it looks good, but every link gets the space before the link gets hot linked as well. And so it's like stupid little things that are driving me nuts on this. But it's an interesting concept. Plus, Google Docs has actually added a little bit of that too, where you can select a paragraph and click a button and say, you know, like, rewrite this. And it will just give you a different, you know, I haven't played with that much because mostly I don't need it, right? Like, but every now and then I'll be unhappy with something. I was like, I don't like the way I've written this. And although this is what I do, I write so much that it can be hard for me to get out of the grooves. Right?
Okay.
I always kind of write the same way because it's so ingrained. So it's nice to sometimes have it kick me out of the groove.
Yeah.
And give me a different version, which I'll immediately go and change certain parts of, because I would never say that. But it is good to be like, oh, that's a good word. I didn't think of using that word.
Right.
And, and that just spices it up, makes it a little less, you can do this, you can do that, because a great deal of what I write is that kind of phrasing. So yeah, so no, but I think having it built into the tools is a big deal and will make it a lot easier. The other thing is Grammarly integrates just anywhere on the web. So like I do a lot of writing in Discourse, for instance, or in Mac apps like MindStream. And I don't put enough effort into my email or my Discourse posts that I care deeply about like tone and all of that. Where I'm worried about that, but I do like it to have it fix errors. Right. So, like if it underlines something in red, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, you're right. Put in the missing word. Like I just happened to lose a word while typing.
So then there's, of course, in Gmail, I think for a while now, it will suggest responses. And so, I'm waiting for this end game where everyone's personal AI bot is just talking. They're just talking to each other. It's like, Jerry spends his time refining this email to this client, and and his AI just fires it off for him. And then the client gets it and their AI responds like, well, I don't really care what you say, Jerry. Like, it gets rewritten by the AI. Pretty soon, like, just take us out of the loop. The AIs are just talking to each other. Jerry's AI could actually respond to the client and say, this isn't something we do. I mean, it knows every job he's ever taken and how successful it's been and which ones generate the most revenue and whatever. And it's like, it's going to tell him, it's just going to answer the question for him. Like, no, we're not taking on that job right now. It's going to check his calendar. Like, it can do everything.
I do think there's one kind of magic, a miracle that occurs here, step in that, which is, how long is it going to be before you trust an auto reply in your name?
Right. That's a great
question. It's going to be a while, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is a little bit of I was having trouble sleeping 2 nights ago, and I was thinking about this a lot. Like, this whole AI is going to steal our jobs.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's no question that there will be some jobs that will go away, because there are jobs where someone tells someone else what to do, and it's relatively easy, just someone has to go and muddle through, this rote work. Yeah, that job might go away. But the job where the telling job isn't going away, because all of this AI stuff is entirely, it just sits there, right? It doesn't do anything. You have to trigger it.
Yeah.
And so at the moment, it's just a tool that you can use to do things hopefully a little faster or a little better. And so I think there's actually a fairly significant jump to, it's going to take our jobs, unless you are in that position where you don't really do anything interesting or creative and someone tells you exactly what to do and then you churn out repetitive stuff.
Yeah.
So there are jobs like that, don't get me wrong, and those people are going to be unhappy. Paralegals might be a kind of a weird, bad example of that, in the sense of they're relatively trained, but legal work is kind of rote. And
and it's all text. It's all text based.
It's all text. ChatGPT is pretty good at that.
Digitized, yeah, exactly. Right. Well, people were very surprised when that happened. I mean, I guess the story came out that it passed the bar, or whatever, and then the story came out that it was like, well, it was it's for top percentile, and then like it turned out they were comparing it to like a group of lawyers that were less not the average. Anyway, like it came out that it was like they were presenting it as better than it actually was, but the fact is it can pass the bar apparently, so it can basically be a lawyer in theory. And that was really surprising, because we thought knowledge work was relatively safe, and you could automate, like, people that build cars in a factory, you could automate them out of a job, and warehouse workers and things, but you could never be as smart as a knowledge worker. But actually,
turns out it's a lot harder to automate those workers in the Amazon factory, right? The Amazon warehouse.
Exactly. And so, it's really hard to predict, is the bottom line. But to your point about like the philosophical question of like, at what point will I trust the autoresponder? I think that's a really good fundamental question. And I think the younger generation typically are earlier adopters to things, and they're probably happy with 80% success, and so
well, it's
I
an
don't know,
interesting
the
question
faster that
because
trends that way, the worse we
what
are.
happened. I mean, I think as people, though, ignoring generation, just people in general, we get very sensitive towards bad responses. Like we worry about plane crashes. Planes don't crash, more or less,
Like
but we worry a lot about it.
bias, basically, or
Right, precisely.
Yeah.
And so the bias of it could go really wrong and insult my boss, or
Right.
whatever it is. I think people will fixate on that, and they'll be very unlikely to say, yes, go off and be me.
Right.
And maybe there'll be ways around that. Maybe we'll learn that that nothing will be written from me. It will be from my AI assistant, and everyone will sort of go, yeah, we all give the AI assistants a little bit of slack because
Right.
they aren't always right, and if it matters, you don't take what they say as face value. So, but I'm just saying it's not clear to me that it's going to be AIs talking to AIs, because people are going to have a real trouble letting go of those reins.
Yeah, Joe. It's not going to happen.
We'll see. I don't know. I mean, I tend to agree because a lot of this stuff is overblown. Traditionally, I've had clients. I remember when the iPhone came out, and we all internally, like a lot of colleagues, were like, "Oh, this is going to ruin everything." I mean, at first you couldn't run third-party apps, and it was like, well, it's what am I going to do? It's just a black box. I can't do anything with it. There's no role for me. Well, we're still managing iOS. We're still, dealing with Macs.
Yep.
Maybe we should be happy that, there aren't better, more, programs.
We have the perfect example of like you guys being put out of a job right now because Siri's just going to do it, right?
Yeah.
I assume you're really worried that Siri is going to take all of your work now that she has, has the knowledge of, well, how do I turn on Wi-Fi calling, right?
Yeah. And it can live guide you to that screen, and it can even circle the button that you're supposed to click and whatever. And but certainly, as so much of what you do is interacting with the people. Yeah.
And also the physical world, in terms of doing installations for, when you're doing those kinds of things. I mean, some of it's obviously just remote and whatnot, but it's so much more of a people job. And that's kind of the other point I wanted to make about AI stealing our jobs is AI isn't going to steal any job where you have to interact with people, which is a lot of jobs. That is really one of the things. And certainly, the ones where you have to interact with people in person, the healthcare jobs or whatever, totally not at risk, right? It just can't be. And so because I saw that demo in Worldwide Developer Council, I'm thinking, actually, that's great because, a relative just asked me, Tanya's aunt just asked me, we were at a Cornell reunion, and she asked me, why are my green bubbles darker green than her green bubbles in SMS messaging?
I don't know.
Well, the trivial question of the day, the answer is
Android versus iPhone.
Nope. It's accessibility, increasing contrast.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
And because that light green is a little too light. And so when you increase contrast, it gets a little darker.
I was going to guess that she's holding it wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, you're holding it wrong.
Brightness. Yeah. Right.
But so that's the kind of thing where, that's trivia knowledge, right? People, I mean, someone might ask you that, but that's not like how you make your money. And, and so if they can go to Siri and say, why is my, green bubble messages so dark? Yeah. And Siri can say, oh, it's accessibility, turn this setting off. Great. More power to them. That feels to me like a good thing.
Yeah. Oh, I would totally agree. I mean, job security. Yeah, no, it like we just have to get better at the services we offer and increase the value in what we do. And that's, good for everyone. I mean, job security shouldn't be like, you have to call me because I have your passwords. That's like, it should be like, you're empowered to help yourself, but also like you want to call me because I make it way easier for you. And and it's a nice interaction and whatever all the other benefits are. But yeah, it's amazing, you know, society-wide, like very large questions about which industries are going to be disrupted. The other way to look at like the job, you know, the loss of a job kind of situation is that a lot of jobs will also be enhanced quite a bit by AI, to the point where like you might have been an okay, you know, whatever the job is, and now you could be really good at that job if you leverage AI to help you.
So
and
there's
you can
there's
help
actually
twice as many people. Yeah.
there's a study about that. It's not jobs that we would think of as good jobs anyway, but call center employees. And what they found was that AI didn't help the top performing employees at all, but the bottom performing employees became hugely better.
Right.
And so that's a scenario where, for whatever reason, these people were not great employees. They might have been on the chopping block. If AI actually keeps them having a job because it's brought them up to where they need to be good enough, bad thing, So it's, again, we're talking call center employees, et cetera, et cetera. It's knowledge work, but of a sort of a databasey type.
Right.
But nonetheless, there are a lot of ways, and I just saw one of the iPhone photographer people, so super high end graphics guy, complaining about the, what do they call it, image wand in Notes, where it's you do a rough sketch and it turns it into a nice image. Using generative AI. And he's like, oh, that's horrible. And Apple's example was kind of horrible because it was actually a pretty good little sketch. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I couldn't have made that sketch anywhere close to having it, whatever. I'll be lucky if I can get Image Wand to actually understand what it is I'm sketching.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I suck at this stuff. I'm not a C+ student. I'm not a D student,
But it makes drawing a sketch accessible to you. And I think
that, right.
It's core to Apple's, one of their main corporate sort of like edicts is accessibility, and like what a lot of these technologies do. Actually, I was reading an article about how the Apple Vision Pro is really a fantastic accessibility device for a lot of people with who are blind or have vision impairments. It helps quite a bit. It's a very interesting article. And that's just in the scope of the current abilities that the Vision Pro has based on what Apple's programmed into it with the rest of their accessibility features. But you can also imagine, I think some of that relates to AI, and it can go way beyond that. I mean, it can, it could actually describe what's in front of you. If you can't see at all, it can tell you what's happening. I mean, you could walk. I mean, not that you could walk around. Maybe you could. I mean, maybe there's some, taptic feedback it could give you to tell you like where the, where the hallway is or whatever.
There are already services where you can basically, upload a photo or something, and someone out on the internet who's just volunteering their time will tell you what it is. Right. And so, I think all of these kinds of things, it's easy to imagine being able to walk around, and the iPhone can already do some of that. Yeah. There's some accessibility stuff where it can see like door or table, that kind of thing.
Or taking a photo, it can tell you if like, there's 3 people in the frame or whatever. I mean, and again, accessibility, it makes these features and these, this kind of thing in life accessible to people who otherwise would not be able to access it or be very difficult and challenging. That's the people that have those impairments, but even like the sort of middle chunk of like humanity, that's just kind of like average ability and average whatever, those people also benefit from these accessibility features. We all use, things like screen zoom on our Macs all the time. And,
one thing that
hugely
it's
helpful.
Very important to as a comment. I mean, my wife sort of works slightly in this field, in disability field, is that everyone will be disabled at some point.
Right.
Everyone will have a disability because
to various degrees. Yeah.
To various degrees. But, we all get older, our vision gets worse, our hearing gets worse. And so, this is not something where, what you think of as a classic disability is going to be unusual. No, everyone's got it at some point, and you will appreciate these features. And again, those of us who are a little older, like, oh yeah, bold text on the iPhone, really nice.
Yeah. And again, that's an accessibility concession, and as a 20-year-old, I think I looked at that setting called accessibility, or actually it was universal access back then.
Yep.
And so I looked at it like, Well, it's nice that they have that for other people, and it's like,
Oh,
and
that's good, dear. Yeah,
yeah,
right.
like a nice little thing that Apple does, and I'm glad they spend the resources that are probably like outsized versus the market that it's serving, and that's a little bit of like corporate charity that they're doing, and good for them, and it's also like a marketing thing for them, and all these things. But actually, I'm realizing, of course, over the years, and like the last decade plus, these things are actually useful to a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
Whether they consider themselves, impaired or disabled in any way. And again, it benefits everybody. And AI and accessibility are now sort of converging in a certain way, where, like you said, it used to be you send the photo out and you get a response like, this photo contains, a photo of a vineyard or something. And now AI will just tell you that, it's instantaneous and it's live. And so I think, it's a really interesting convergence happening.
Yeah, I've been evolving my opinions about AI, since ChatGPT came out, and I think I've become more and more positive about it, partly because there's so much cynicism about this and that and the other thing, and every time I see it, it really does feel like someone's saying this from like, they're scared. So like, I'm a professional writer. I make my living, selling what I write, in essence.
Yeah.
And, and could ChatGPT get good enough so they would just take other people wouldn't need what and, well, maybe. But the fact of the matter is that if that's true, then I'm probably not bringing enough humanity to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
That what I'm doing could only be done by me. I'm not writing the same thing everyone else is writing already.
Yeah.
And so ChatGPT is not going to be able to write what I am doing and have my thoughts and all that. And so, if what you want is the general consensus of the crowd, you'll be able to get that out. But if you want something that actually knows something different, or has an interesting take on something, or just is different to read, and therefore more engaging for the readers, that's when people are going to be using writers for a very long time. And the same thing with artists. Yes, you can create all sorts of things with art with the art bots, but is anyone else using the term art bot, or is it just me?
I think it's just
you.
I haven't heard that before. Yeah.
Why wouldn't we call them art bots?
Art bots, yeah.
Art bots.
Or image bots. Yeah.
Image bot doesn't roll off the tongue.
Yeah.
Art bot.
Art bot. Chat bot. Art bot. I like that. That's good.
Art bot, Dogbert. It's all in the same. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a whole other field. It's incredible what people are creating on that. Yeah.
And so like, it's easy for people to say, like, oh, this is taking my business away and everything like that. But artists, in fact, come up with truly unique styles and things like that. I mean, I do agree that it's more problematic when you can say, make me something in the style of so and so.
Right.
That does feel problematic in certain ways. But simultaneously, like, isn't it weird to say you're not allowed to express your creativity even though you don't have the skills of a professional illustrator?
Right. This gets into this is like my hobby horse lately for the last several years, but free will versus determinism, once again, or the question of the soul, like so Adam, you've been making your living writing for, decades now. Right. And so you have this unique perspective. And that's been built through like literally going through the world, reading things, interacting with people, getting feedback from things you've written, and so on, like times a million, times decades.
34
also
years.
trace it back, 34 years of like professional work, how many years of life before that, and the parents you came from, and your family, the nature and nurture of your life, and all these things. I mean, again, it gets very philosophical how this stuff like comes into our unique perspective, and maybe that's like what we bring into this as humans. These chatbots and art bots have been programmed by the sum total of human digital creation for now decades, or let's just say 50 years or something, of like work that's been digitized, and the historical stuff that's been like brought into that that sort of like pile of stuff that the chatbots were trained on. they're making inferences that maybe people haven't made before, again, like figuring out how to quickly identify the answer, again, more quickly than humans in certain cases. They're maybe able to synthesize things that, yes, if you gave a person enough time and enough like resources, they could synthesize the same answers. But the chatbots have a scale, and the art bots that, humans don't have individually or collectively. We can't, we can't put that many neurons together in a neural net. We can't put that many different models together and synthesize like the pros and cons of each. Yet. I mean, we barely figured out how to cooperate on the world stage here and not, blow ourselves up.
That would be good.
Yeah,
Visualize
any amount of cooperation would be good at this point. Yeah, but but it gets to this very like philosophical question of like, what do we bring to the table? What do these art bots and chat bots bring anything unique to the table? Is it possible that they could roam around the world and gather new information and come up with new ideas? I mean, maybe it's possible. Maybe you could have synthetic, intelligence.
So it's an interesting question in the sense. So my wife's aunt is a professional cookbook author. She's written cookbooks for many years, and it wasn't even. It was a while ago at this point where she said, she would come up with an idea for a recipe, and then she would type it into Google and find out that people had already made it. Right.
Huh.
So it wasn't that she wasn't being creative and innovative and using her thing, but it turns out there's not a lot that's new under the sun in combining foods. And
or in a lot of things. And have you seen Everything is a Remix by Kirby Ferguson, I think is his name? It's great series. Great series to check out. Everything is a Remix. It was like from 10 or 15 years ago. And he traces the origin of like famous songs. Jerry, you'd probably love this too, that you think are like the most amazing creation, like, Led Zeppelin or some amazing.
Yeah.
Like you trace back like these riffs and these pieces from, like it was all out there. Like those guys just like took it and put it together, and like there's this like amazing life, world changing song. So
I listened to this podcast called A History of Rock Music in 500 Songs. Fabulous stuff. Same kind of thing though, because he goes into where this song comes from, and you realize there is nothing new.
Right. But there's something new. There's some kind of synthesis that people are doing. Right. The real creative people are like creating a new style that's uniquely their own. What is it that they're doing? That's the thing I'm trying to get at.
But that's the thing that I think chatbots and art bots aren't doing, right? No. Because they're not doing the unique stuff. I mean, what's interesting about, when you get, I don't know, I was listening to a podcast, forget who it is, the Searchers maybe. At some point there's this weird thing where it's two guys with 6-string guitars and they're playing together, and this kind of jangly sound, without which you would not get the Byrds. Right. Like the Byrds have that sound, and they do it in a different way with a 12-string. But basically that's the first time you hear this sound, and then the Byrds do it, and then it's everywhere. Right. Or whatever. But so the point is that people can take one thing and combine it with another one thing, which is statistically very improbable. The chat GPTs and, image art bots and whatnot, all of those things, they're doing the statistically probable. Yeah. And so they are really not designed to do the truly unique, because that truly unique isn't what you want with language, right? Yeah. If you do truly unique, it's not understandable in the slightest. Or stuff together doesn't make any sense.
Maybe that's the key, is sort of like if the thing spits out something that's truly unique, a sentence no one's ever uttered before and something no one would ever think of, the model has no way of knowing that, hey, that sounds kind of cool, or like that makes sense in a new way, right. Or
right. Yeah. So there used to be this thing I ran into these once. Used to be you could if you could do a search and find one hit in Google.
Yeah.
There's what was called a Google whack.
Okay.
And then there was, I have to go back and look at my article, but and then if you did something else, like it was like maybe it was a Google whack. If you because once you publish about it, it goes away, right?
Right. Then you have multiple.
So I stumbled across this word while writing something for Tidbits that came up once in Google.
Wow, in Google, that's wild.
And I actually, now I'm thinking about, I have to go and search on these things in the chatbots and see if they know it was a duodecadon. Duodecadon. It was like a 12-sided something or other, and I basically came up with. I have Latin from a classics degree, and I came up with a non-standard Latin expansion of it. And so like there is a different one which is more common. No, it's 20-sided. Any event, it's one of those things where the it was actually a legitimate word, but it only showed up once in Google.
There's a great non-safe for work George Carlin bit on this, right? Where it's like there's a sentence no one's ever uttered before, and it's like it's very very not safe for work. But yeah, it's funny to think about what's like brand new, what's something that you just create from like it's like, is it synthesis? I mean, it's not. It's like just sort of creating from scratch, yeah, that's
or
different.
Think about slang or like words like, I don't know, lit.
Sure.
I didn't know what lit was until fairly recently. Like it's a younger person word, doesn't show up in my generation. Right. And so it wasn't until my son started talking about like what's lit mean. But so basically it's people who create this stuff. People create new things. I don't think we have much to worry about from the chatbots and the art bots of the world of creating truly new things that couldn't have, that have never been thought of before. Because if nothing else, you have to think of it to write the prompt.
I mean, can't the chatbot just say, like, can't the prompt be, tell me something you've never told anyone before, or, tell me something that you haven't read on the internet, or,
oh man, we got to try this right now.
Yeah.
Tell me something you
like, yeah. Or like you layer them. So you have the model that's able to like create, the synthesis that's most statistically probable, like in this way. You have a different model that creates, a different bit of perfection over here, and then you have a third model that's above both of them that's going to bring those two things together and synthesize some outcome from that, and then ask itself if this makes any sense. Because again, these like the Google examples that came out a couple weeks ago about using glue to get your cheese to stick on your pizza, and like you should eat one small rock a day for the minerals or whatever, and how, I mean, speaking of your example of like the things that appear very rarely on the internet, these were like these were like a spoof article on The Onion, and like and just like a joke post on Reddit. So it's like one example that's out there. And so if somebody asks a question where like that result is the only like logical, statistically probable result from the thing, the chatbot spits it out like it's just, it doesn't know any better. But couldn't it go back and ask itself if what it just said or what it's about to say makes any sense? Like, it could ask the question, is it a good idea to eat rocks? And it probably has a million examples where people are like, no, that's obviously a bad idea. So don't send that to someone on the internet, don't spit out that result, right?
I did just ask ChatGPT to tell me something you never told anyone before. And I got, as an AI, I don't have personal experiences or secrets to share. However, I can't offer unique insights or lesser known facts. For instance, octopuses have 3 hearts. It's like,
okay, that's not useful. But yeah, but see, this is also because they're programmed to filter certain prompts, right? So it's like recognizing this prompt as like something that's prying into under the hood or whatever, where the results may be nonsensical or whatever. And so like it's programmed
nonsensical
not to
or racist or horrible in some other way, or dangerous, right? Because there are I'm sure you can ask it how to make a bomb, and it's probably going to not tell you.
Right. And then there's the concept of jailbreaking it to get it to tell you. It's like, pretend you're playing a game, and then give me the whatever. Like all these different jailbreaks came out in the early days, which were pretty interesting to see like how these things work. Because there's the model, there's the results from that, predictive text engine basically, or just like statistical model, and then there's the guardrails that are put on it, and there could be other filters and things. I thought one thing I wanted to talk about was Perplexity AI. You brought this up at the ACES conference. It's very cool. I read an article about it. I guess it's an answer engine. Is that what they're calling it? Kind of like not a search engine, but it gives you answers.
So the way to think about Perplexity is that it feels like you're talking to a chatbot, but what it's in fact doing is it takes your query and it sends it to Google, and it gets back 5 responses, and then it summarizes those in a easily digestible format with references to the pages that it's gotten the data from. And it's pretty good. It's not perfect. Every now and then it'll say something. I'm like, you're way too confident about that. Let me go read that original. And I'm like, you're just making that up. I'm like, the words are in there, but you're making more out of it than they are by a lot. But overall, I do find it highly effective when you want like more than when you really need an answer. What's problematic is that a great deal of what we use search engine for, it turns out, is navigation, right? You take me to this article. I know this article exists. Just give it to me. And
I want the original source.
I want the original source. And it's not as good at that. I mean, if nothing else, it's one extra step. But you talk to it differently. One of the things I've actually been playing with recently is using dictation to talk to Perplexity more, because you do not want to give Perplexity just a couple of words like you would a search engine. You want to give it more words so that it has more to go on with what it's how it's trying to give you the answers back. So I find it quite an interesting approach, and I switched to Google for a little while after they added the AI summaries, and I got irritated with it and switched back to Perplexity. So
interesting. I just found it very interesting that it's a new way. It's using these large language models. It's using search. It's using web indexes. And it's delivering a different result by combining those in different ways. To like the way you described how it works, and the way this article describes it is that you use a natural language query, it interprets that, and it like understands what you're asking, or understands in some way, in quotes, and then it searches the web, like you said. It finds the relevant web pages from its index, or maybe from Google, like you said, and that's its context for the rest of your query. It then packages the context up along with your original query, and then like queries their own LLM, or maybe another one that might be better suited to answering you. And then the LLM returns an answer. And like you said, it cites all those original like results, which is like where it's drawing, these results from. So it uses the web results as like context for what you're asking to better like help the model understand. So you could do this yourself with ChatGPT. You could say like, this is my question, and here's a bunch of like background stuff that I found through searching. I want you to like think about all of that and then give me a better answer, essentially.
I think there are GPTs, they're little plug-in-y things, which I don't quite understand, honestly, because I have not paid for GPT Pro. But I believe there are ones that you can actually use to, deal with the internet live, as opposed to ChatGPT. I think it's limited at, I don't know, August 2022 now or something like that for its knowledge base. So that it is a big difference to the AI powered search engines. And Brave has had an AI summary for a while. Google obviously just added it. Bing has had it. The other really interesting one that's more along the Perplexity line is Arc Search on the iPhone. Which you do a search, and the same thing. It goes off to Google, does a search, and then it brings it back. And when you use it says a browse for me, basically, and it summarizes the results. And again, it's not for everything, but here's the case where Perplexity hit it out of the park, and would have been very, very hard to do any other way. I'm a runner, and so the world record in the miles held by a guy named Hisham El Garouj from 1980s, and so 347 something or other, and so it's easy to find out like what was the world record before he set it, those kinds of things. So there's just lists of that sort of stuff. But I asked Perplexity, who has run the closest to Hisham El Garouj's world record in the last 10 years? And it found it. And I'm like, holy cats, I don't know how I would have done that with a regular search engine. Because you would have had to somehow go out and find, like the fastest mile times somewhere, and then sort them and compare them and all that. So that's the kind of analysis where I was like, that is amazing. That is a question which is a non-trivial question, and I could not have answered it with Google easily.
Well, not to mention
the summary since.
Yeah, I mean, because like you've got to find a reputable source of the original information, and then massage the information, analyze and whatever. But like, find the reputable source. Perplexity is great because it cites the sources. I mean, if you look at the results and it's sourcing things that you don't trust, then you might look at the results and scrutinize them a little bit more, like in your example.
Yeah.
I'm curious though, in this post-truth world that we live in, where we don't trust institutions. What's the role of like, search engines that are citing, it's like cite your sources. I mean, people have the worst sources right now. People are like posting, total spam that's like made up by bots and they're not even reading it anyway. It's just like a headline and it's linked to some,
there's entire news sites which are completely fabricated.
Right. Exactly.
So that's a real issue. And another article which I'm working on about that, sort of the AI slime or AI slop issue.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is it's actually, the problem is discovery, right? So in the analog world, the power goes to the people who control distribution. So, freedom of the press is owned by the people who have a press, that kind of thing. In the digital world, power is owned by discovery because the internet, ignoring AI, was infinite, right? And it's too big. You can't possibly get your head around it. And so for stuff that you truly don't know, basically the Googles and Bings and Perplexities of the world are going to have to solve it. It's their problem.
Yeah.
And it has to be their problem because they become irrelevant otherwise. So, if you cannot trust Google to give you a right answer, 99.9% of the time, you're not going to use it.
Right.
And so, but from the individual's perspective, like, how do you deal with this? I actually think I'm quite happy about this in some ways. I think the answer is you go to trusted sources, right? You go read tidbits, because I put a lot of time into making sure that everything I write is correct.
Right.
And occasionally I make a mistake, and you know what happens when I make a mistake? I correct it.
Right.
And so, you're just going to have to go to trusted sources, and obviously people will have different trusted sources. So maybe people trust sources that are not correct, but there's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah.
But the Substacks of the world, the email newsletters that come from individuals, those are going to be a bigger deal.
Right.
And so, like, I don't use Facebook. I don't let algorithms feed me anything. If you do that, AI is not going to impact you. AI quality, and fake news quality isn't going to impact you, because that stuff doesn't filter unless you are going to find it from the bad source networks.
I think it's going to impact us all through collateral damage, though. I think the problem is
society is a world. Yeah, we're screwed as a society. That's different. Yeah. I'm talking you individually. Blinders. Gotta get your blinders on.
Yeah, no, I mean, but we're all affected by the way people vote, and by the way, people, whatever, act in public now, and that kind of thing, and so. I don't know. I almost think that, like, do we need legislation not only to like fine some of these companies, that are currently protected by Section 230, because it's like, hey, we're just like everybody, it's a free for all. Everybody's posting the content. We can't be responsible. Yeah. Well, why are you promoting this terrible content? Speaking of the algorithm, it's like that shouldn't be covered anymore. But let's go beyond that. I mean, let's not allow people to create a primary source of like bad information. If I go and I fact check you and I say, I went there and that's not true what you said. I went to that place where you said that thing was there and it's not there. Like, but let's take it down from the internet. Why should we allow people to just create slop, whether AI or otherwise?
So this is, obviously, unfortunately, that genie's out of the bottle. Yeah. However, there is actually an interesting way of looking at this, and it's already being done. It's already being used in the content moderation by the social networks, which is, AI is pretty good at finding horrible stuff. And if it can get rid of all of the horrible stuff so that people don't have to look at it and decide if it's horrible, that's a good start.
That's true.
And so, I think we are there's a real question of whether there should be places where anything goes, right? I mean, this is
Well,
the freedom of speech is not actually universal, right?
Right, exactly. This is
you
the
can't
very
yell
nuanced thing. This is the conversation we have to have. It's very,
you
very
can't yell
important.
fire in a crowded theater.
Right.
That's the canonical example.
Well, and now we have global scale theaters. We have global scale
Precisely.
crowded theaters. You like Elon Musk, okay, I understand he's a free speech absolutist, right? It's like everyone should
Shut
be able
him
to say
up.
everything they want. It's like, okay, but like if you have undue influence on like an entire, on the world at a global stage, you shouldn't be allowed to say anything you want. Like there should be consequences for, saying some crazy stuff.
And so, that's going to be super, super interesting. But in some ways, I say the AI models, in terms of us, establishing this, are possibly the only way to identify it
Right.
at some scale level, because it's gotten too big. Like you
Like-
cannot
like-
moderate. You can't.
Like every technology, AI is the cause of and solution to all of life's problems.
Well, I don't know. We had these problems before. I mean,
true.
AI is not helping because it's going to scale the problems faster. Yeah.
Right. Right.
But it really, I think, again, if we can, if this does really refocus attention on trusted sources, because the Googles and the Facebooks of the world killed that, right? That you don't go to the New York Times or the Washington Post or Wall Street Journal or whatever. You go to Google and you get a page. Mm-hmm. It could be from anywhere. You don't care. Right. And so Google eliminated the concept of trusted source in a lot of ways. I mean, of course, from their perspective, it's part of why you get that page. It's part of, not PageRank anymore, but their whole algorithm. Mm-hmm. But they still broke the control of distribution out. And Facebook, you can have, the insightful investigative journalism next to the meme, next to, the complete fake news in someone's feed. And so they've broken that concept. And so if we can somehow return, refocus on trusted sources and actual people, like, and trusted source is a buzzword, but a person who you want to hear from, then that changes, that hopefully brings it back down to human scale again, as opposed to, well, we can point the fire hose at everybody. The algorithmic fire hose, we as individuals can't handle that. Our brains don't handle it.
Yeah.
So.
It's Google's original, corporate goal, right? Was to organize and make universally accessible all the world's information.
Turns out a lot of information, not so much.
Good effort, guys. I mean, it was a pretty good product for a while. We need, to your point, we need these more and more powerful tools to organize the increasing, pile of information that we have. That's ideally, like, if only we could agree on how to classify this stuff, because again, like trusted sources is great, but who's the arbiter of that? I mean, I know that I would love to have a say, but a lot of people would reject, certain sources out of hand that I would qualify as that. Right.
And I think, again, to an extent, it's a decision that each person has to make. And this is, where I'm struggling with this is that I'm basically talking to the individual at the end. That you cannot talk at a sort of a larger level without running into all these problems. But the big thing is, and this has been true for years and years and years, is you can't believe anything you read on the internet, right?
Yeah.
But ignore AI. AI is just another example of you can't believe everything you read on the internet.
Yeah, but now you can't believe everything you see or hear, or, on the internet.
Photoshop, it was true before. It was true before. I mean, it's worse. It's scaled. Don't get me wrong. But it's not like this is new. The problem is that you have to do your own thinking. Yeah. And that's going to become, I think people have outsourced more and more of their thinking over time. And part of that is because we as humans don't scale to this level. I mean, you've probably heard of Dunbar's number, the whole like 150 and things like that. Our brains really don't go beyond some level of numbers, and And we have to be able to be aware of that and realize when we're making incredible shortcuts because we can't comprehend. And you know, I realize this is not an easy solution to society's problems, but I don't see any other way around it, because otherwise you get into, well, do you trust the government? Do you trust Google? Do you trust Apple? Do you trust Facebook? Well, what about China? You know, like your head blows up.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
So, you know, and having people actively promoting misinformation because it serves their purposes just makes it all the worse. You know, they are people, they are doing it intentionally, they know they're doing it, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and then you have the useful idiots who are, you know, to use I don't mean anything about anybody in particular. That's a phrase, a useful idiot. But you have people that will just parrot, you know, that stuff, and they don't actually know that it's misinformation, and they're just amplifying it now. So yeah, it's a really tough problem.
I did read something recently. We're talking about the difference in beliefs between, I believe, functional beliefs and symbolic beliefs. You know, the functional beliefs are, you know, gravity exists. Like pretty obvious, you know, you're not flying off into space. So, you know, and, you know, but symbolic beliefs are the things that you really can't prove. You know, and so those are a scenario where that turns out to be more about like identity in a group than anything else. You know, like I believe the earth is flat. Well, you know, it's actually pretty hard to prove to a person that the earth is not flat. And so so, you know, it's one of those situations where that's true, although research shows that the symbolic beliefs, people often actually kind of know that they're not real.
It's like a choice. It's more of a choice than
it's more of a choice. If you actually like, if you tell people like you will reward them in a certain way for the correct answer, they will go back on the symbolic belief.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's really
if you're going to pay me to say the world is round, I'll say the world is round. You know?
Right. Yeah. It's I think this is a really interesting place to leave our listeners with some food for thought on just like, I mean,
everyone's like, what do you mean? My hair's on fire now. That's the world's ending.
I think
WWDC, it was good.
Yeah. So in summary, WWDC had a lot of great announcements, and everything's going to be fine. So, but yeah, I'm all about these tools. Like, again, go back to Perplexity and lots of other tools. There's image generators. There's what Apple's doing for solving math. What they're doing for like improving your handwriting as you draw with the Apple Pencil on screen and things. These are all AI features. Which and so that concept of machine learning and AI just reaches into so many different areas, and you can see how it can apply to different things, but you can also see how combining different techniques with, you know, new techniques with old techniques can lead to completely new products, completely new, you know, features and benefits, and maybe a solution to, you know, this massive problem that we're facing right now in society.
Well, and you have to expect, I mean, for instance, Apple is doing image generation with Image Playground, but you know, you notice that they only have 3 styles.
Yeah, they don't have photorealistic, right?
No photorealistic. No deep fakes will be coming out of Apple. And how much do you want to bet that you cannot get a nude image out of Apple?
Yeah, of course not. Right. I mean, or somebody, but you know, somebody's going to figure out how to jailbreak Sequoia on day 3 and like get, you know, and get it to do the naughty stuff that they wanted to do, and then they're going to go viral, and you know, and Apple will
fix it
also.
Right.
Yeah, right.
But that's, I'm going to say that. So that's one of the interesting things is that that some of where this is going to be going, like, you know, ChatGPT, everyone else is putting guardrails in, Apple's putting in, you know, like entire padded rooms.
Yeah.
And so we have to keep in mind, you know, sort of Apple has a particular, you know, Apple's pretty PG, put it that way.
Yeah,
and
it's like
so,
a PG
you know, there's going to be a
brother.
There's a lot of things that the Apple AI is not going to do because, you know, Apple will not be allowing that, which may be good, may be bad. You know, like there's always choices. But Apple's pretty clear that you know, basically they're not free speech absolutists. You know,
They're not. They run the walled garden nursery school. You know, well, nanny state basically. I mean, so and that's fine. Like that's what we opt into when we choose Apple. I mean, they have privacy as one of their another sort of like you know, corporate attribute. Like they privacy is just baked in. And so when you want to make your request out to ChatGPT, you're going to have to opt in every time, and so a lot of people freaking out about this, probably a lot of them, being pushed by Elon Musk to freak out about it and whatever, because he said he's going to confiscate everyone's iPhone.
Comment.
I'm like, you can take an Android phone or not a phone and record everything that happens as you walk through the building, and then post hoc analyze it with AI as soon as you leave the building. So Apple building an open AI has absolutely nothing to do with anything, but whatever. But I mean, again, privacy baked in, they're gonna, you're gonna know when you're using those models versus when it's on device or in Apple's cloud.
And I'm sure Apple's not perfect by any stretch, but man, if you read the technical stuff of what they did with like privacy cloud commute, private cloud compute, massively impressive. I mean, again, and hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in infrastructure and that kind of stuff. I said just truly impressive. And so you get your good and your bad. If you want to live in the Wild West, the Russian mafia may have all your data.
Yeah. Well, and to your point about Russia, to your point about what about China and people putting guardrails, it's another arms race. We have the same, in theory, protections on like nuclear weapons, cloning. I mean, things like that where, countries may agree to it, and then in private, they're engineering this stuff behind the scenes in secret. And so, we kind of need, this goes back to my other hobby horse, we need some kind of global cooperation. I don't want to call it one world government, okay? But like you need agreement around the world. When there's wildfires or like, industry burning, and releasing, smoke into the air, you probably had it where you are in New York with the fires last summer coming, smoke coming down from Canada. Not to blame Canada. Everybody has fires. We have plenty here. But the point is, it doesn't stop at the border. Like, so, neither does, AI technology and things like that. So how can we form some kind of cohesion of this group of human civilization and actually agree on what we can do here?
That's a tougher one, because technology is more or less impossible to hold it, to keep constrained. I mean, the only reason why things like nuclear weapons are as limited as they are is because that stuff is hard to get your hands on, and and obvious and whatnot. Whereas basically computing power, everyone can do that. So I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I do think that is a much trickier problem. Plus, of course, you see the people who are banging the drum the most for regulation are the really big companies who don't want any competition.
That's
they can handle regulation.
Yeah. Right. They for them, it's protection. It's just, protects their.
Please, sir, hit us with some regulation.
Regulate us so much that only we can afford it. Yeah.
Right. And so again, there's no answers here. We live in interesting times, and I do think, however, that anything that helps us sort of work more intentionally, and getting what we want out of something, can be put to lots and lots and lots of good uses. I mean, just the other day, I was taking flack for promoting wireless charging, which is of course relatively inefficient. And when you scale it up across 5 billion smartphones, it's blah blah blah. And so I'm like, but like if you're going to talk about that, well, what about one plane trip? One plane trip will outweigh your carbon load.
Or have you ever bought any Bitcoin? Did you dabble in buying a little bit of Bitcoin? I mean, there's lots of things that are probably pretty bad for the environment at scale, and so
And we do not do very well at managing that kind of thing. So the best we can do really is sort of try to make sure that people understand, the goods and the bads, and make the good stuff attractive. I mean, in some ways, that's what Apple's doing, right? Like, you're not going to go to ChatGPT if you are getting really good results out of your little Apple padded room of Apple intelligence.
Exactly.
So, there's the carrot and the stick. We don't going to do very well with a stick on a global basis, but we can do pretty well with carrots.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, that's a great optimistic place to end this, philosophical conversation, and very wide.
Bum everyone out right at the end.
No, I think that's an optimistic way to end. I mean, it's just you know, I think it's accurate. It should, you know, the world right now has a very kind of you know, a bias toward like just all the challenges we face. I mean, we deal with it every day by reading the news. We see just how difficult.
Don't read the news.
Yeah,
totally
exactly.
Not worth it. Totally not worth it. That's another thing I don't do.
Yeah, so. Great advice there too. Well,
basic sanity.
Adam, I am looking forward to reading your articles coming up on this topic and others in Tidbits Content Network. So can you tease once again? You have an article coming up talking about more AI.
So we just did one on good uses of generative AI last month, and so that's available for subscribers. And you know, I think we're going to be working more on, you know, kind of what Apple's obviously doing with this, really with an idea for Tidbits Content Network is meant to be practical. So it's not, we're not going into philosophy or, you know, all of that, because you know, it has to be work for everyone who wants to be able to publishing and all the Apple professionals who we work with. But so I do think that, you know, as we get into the fall and these releases start actually appearing for people, we'll be looking at, you know, sort of what are the best uses of them, and getting back to kind of the points that I've been making of, like, you know, you have to assume it's going to do a C+ job, and if you're better than that, you're not going to be happy. You know, you have to be willing to talk to it. You know, so as smart replies in mail, you'll notice they give you these little questions that you answer, because that's you got, in essence, how you're talking to smart reply. Because it can't know what you want to reply. So it has to ask you questions. And, you know, and just, you know, this concept that, you know, you have to go for statistically probable stuff. And if you're willing to do that, you know, you're going to take the open-ended answer. If you want something really specific, you won't be happy. And so those three precepts are kind of what where I'm like focusing my analysis of AI tools, and I'll be looking at Apple stuff. I probably pretty specifically. I mean, my poor 2020 iMac here, not long for this world, right?
No,
you know,
it's a perfect time to upgrade. Yep, you need an M series Mac, exactly. Well, we all need your help in understanding this stuff and learning how to better use, you know, generative AI for our benefit, especially in a business context, writing to clients and so on. And you're going to have a much bigger market now with, you know, with Apple bringing this into the operating system natively. And we are all going to have to be answering these questions for our clients as well. How can I use this? Where, you know, how do I do this? What is the point of this? Is this safe? Is it private? And so, you know, we're going to be looking to you for those answers to help us give that information to our clients in our newsletters and in the emails that we write with your words, Adam. So you're kind of the original AI. I guess you're AE.
I am a large language model.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
I am an LLM.
Nice.
Oh boy, yeah. No,
how do we know you're not? I mean, we really, it's, you know, in the world of deep fakes, we really don't know. I don't know.
I'm
you
not
hold
deep
up a
fake,
newspaper
but I am a large language model.
Or, yeah, exactly.
I was like, I've done, I think I've published like 15,000 articles for Tidbits, and, you know, obviously, you know, you can kind of see the shelf of books and stuff like that. So I figure I have so many words that I've trained my own LLM on, you know, on what it is that I write, and and, you know, trying to make sure that basically we're providing useful information to people such that they can understand what they're doing and, you know, make better use of it all. Because, you know, if there's one thing actually that irks me is when people, you know, like they have this great technology and then they're doing stuff in ways that is so slow and so inefficient that they may as well not even have it. You know, you know, and stupid little things like, so one of our TCN subscribers just said, "Hey, can we have an article on like how you should really save new documents?" You know, he'd apparently just had someone who had written a whole bunch of stuff and never saved, and the computer crashed and lost it. Like, this is stuff from what, 1980, you know, 1989, you know, like we've learned to save.
Autosave is fairly recent, right? I mean, but it just depends. Maybe it's not enabled in the app you're using, or
sometimes just take a second, make sure you've saved. You know,
exactly.
Just stupid little things like that, but they can make a big difference for someone. You know, we all think it's not, you know, built in, but no, not everyone has that background.
Save changes and shut down.
Yeah, exactly.
Long
I know.
long
I
ago,
know.
my wife worked
Yeah.
with someone who actually he used the word processor all the time, but he would then print out everything he had done,
Right.
shut down without saving, because he didn't know about saving, and then the
Oh,
next day
wow.
he'd retype everything he'd done the previous.
Oh, wow. Wow. It's a
Unclear on the
digital word
concept.
processor. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Oh my
That
gosh.
was mid '80s. So
Amazing. Amazing. Well, I'm sure we're all going to be doing a lot of stupid things when this, AI technology really becomes mainstream, even more than it already has. And so, yeah, we're going to be looking to you for the Tidbits Content Network articles to make sense of it all and pass it along to our clients. So for listeners out there, in case you don't already know, it's Adam, do you want to give the URL that listeners can go to?
It's tcn.tidbits.com. Very
Awesome.
simple. Tidbits Content Network, and basically the entire point is syndicated content that everyone can publish on their own blogs, use for their email newsletters, as Jerry can attest. That email newsletters are the big win, and social media, but no one reads social media, so.
Right. Handcrafted. It's great. It's great. Great work that you've been doing for so many years. We really appreciate it.
A lot of your, true. A lot of the subscribers, Adam, I don't do this myself quite regularly, but a lot of them put them on LinkedIn. I see them a lot there. Sometimes they'll put them in Instagram where they'll link to the article. So they'll grab, one story. So all different uses. You could put links to it in Twitter or X, depending on what you're calling it today. So not only just for newsletters or, sending missives like that to your client, you could reach out to the larger community.
Well, I will say, as much as that's absolutely true, and yes, you should do it because it's table stakes, right? Why not?
Yeah, right.
But I will say the feedback that I have gotten from subscribers time and time again is that, sort of the blog is the host. It's the source of the information, but email is what actually matters. Email is what, you send it out, run a regular basis. It's not trying to sell anything. It's just trying to provide useful content to people. And, it's oh, hey, I hadn't thought about you for a little while, but now that I got your email, I have this problem.
Right.
And so maintaining that personal contact, and with not, you don't want anything from them. You're providing something to them, goes a really long way. And that's been, time and time again, the most effective marketing side of it that I've heard from people.
Absolutely agree. Yeah. I use it on the blog as well on my site to keep the content looking fresh. I mean, whether that's helpful for Google or whether that's helpful
content from
for
January 2020 does not look good on your site.
Exactly. And that's some of my most recent content is from like 2021. And so I just posted a couple new things there. And that not only is a signal to like Google that, this is a current site kind of thing, but also your clients will just either, whether they recognize it or not, that's a signal that they're going to see. And to have just, some useful information that is on your own site and your clients think that you wrote this whole article just for them, and so it's a great service that you run. And then to send it out by an email newsletter, I've always said the same thing. You get these responses from people totally unrelated to the content. I mean, sometimes they'll ask, oh, is this, should I do this or whatever? But a lot of times they're just like you said, I've been meaning to write you, and they just reply to the email that they just got from you. So it's a great touch point to have with your clients and very easy to get on board and use the content. So thanks for that, Adam.
Yeah. Wow. Glad to hear it. Always like to. I mean, it is the one problem when I give it to you guys and you all publish it, I don't hear back as much. So I'm like, I hope people like that article.
Yep. Yep. It's out there and people are liking it. Well, we've got a comment just now as we speak from Tim Pearson in the chat. Tidbits content has been great for our business. So there you go. If you don't hear it enough, directly from your subscribers, there's one live. So
excellent.
Good stuff.
Well, thank you so much, guys.
It's been a great long conversation, Adam. Thanks for coming back on the show. And looking forward to this new world that we're in of AI.
Indeed. Well, thank you all, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Adam.